You're listening to the ReThreading Madness podcast, which airs live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We are recorded and produced on the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to our show.
I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright.
Welcome to the show. Today we talk to Charlotte Watson about estranging from her family. Interesting show. Don't go away. I'm Bernadine Fox, and today I'm sitting down with Charlotte Watson. And I forgot to really get a clearer understanding of what you're doing these days. I know what you've done in the past, but maybe you'd like to tell folks who you are in the world.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I work as a therapist, supporting birthing parents or mothers through their transition into and through motherhood. I've spent a lot of time researching, both to support myself and then now to support clients, why we have the challenges we do in our transitions into and through motherhood right now, and what we can do to support ourselves, and where this is coming from a sort of societal and evolutionary point of view as well, to just get this a fuller picture as I can so that I can support the mothers that I work with.
I've actually never heard of that. So I can see the really big points about supporting birthing parents with new babies and that huge change that happens for mothers, for parents, actually. I shouldn't just say mothers, because life has changed a lot in my lifetime, and dads are as much involved now as mothers are. So, and then I could extrapolate that you're also helping them through puberty. The problem, the place that I feel we have a lot of problems as parents. I'm not sure kids have as much problems going through that as we do. And then to adulthood. But what else kind of things are you supporting them through?
Well, a lot come with diagnoses of postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression as well.
Right.
So that's one, often a really key pain point where they reach out for support and therapy and looking what else is out there. It's great that these challenges and struggles are now acknowledged in society rather than sort of swept under the rug. But Absolutely. What I see is, here's the presenting symptom on the surface, and this diagnosis of, postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression is just put on them with the band-aid of a pharmaceutical. And there isn't that sort of flow of looking what's further upriver about right. why did they end up here? What else could be done? And many of the mothers I work with are, they've maybe tried the pharmaceuticals and it hasn't really worked for them, or it's only provided limiting relief, or they've, it just hasn't been in a line with their values, or intrinsically they're not feeling that this is the route they want to go and they want to explore more. So many are on this sort of quest of understanding, just like I was in my journey, and come across me and my beliefs and research and approach and trainings of, why have we sort of ended up with so many mothers, particularly with postpartum depression diagnoses? Why is it so normalized?
Right.
Why do we stop at just prescribing antidepressants and not actually so how come they're depressed, and how come do they have these chemical imbalances, and what can we be doing to address that? And trying to bring as much of a 360 view.
Right.
So
Well, that's fascinating.
The most appropriate sort of solutions can be found for each person's individual journey to actually, get to as much of the root cause as we can, rather than just stopping with a, this is a band-aid for what's being presented right now.
Right. Well, it's fascinating. Not quite what we're here to talk about, but I'm glad you described that, because I think it's an area that we don't do enough for and don't provide enough support for, especially, when we say to mothers, well, you just had a baby, you should be happy, kind of thing. Much is not understood. But we're here to talk about what happens when you estrange from your family, and how that impacts on us, and why people do it, and where do we go with it, and how do we come out of it whole, and, well, at least as whole as we can be in whatever space we're in. So you are somebody who, like myself, did estrange from your family at quite a young age, 28 years. Can you tell us a little bit, as much as you feel comfortable talking about, why that was important for you?
So people may be able to tell from my accent. I grew up in England, in London, and had a sort of very normal childhood by English terms. My entire family are sort of functional alcoholics, full of emotional constipation, don't talk about problems, just present as good as you can on the surface.
Stiff upper lip.
Exactly. Yeah, really great training from the war.
Yes.
Our worth is based on our achievements and our grades and our job title and what car we have in the driveway and where we go on holiday and all these external sort of status symbols as well. So I was very much brought up and groomed in this 1980s English way of, Margaret Thatcher era feminist movement of, have to be the perfect young lady and also be the extremely high achieving, successful career woman.
Yeah, I think they called that super women. And
yes.
We were expected to do all that. That was, clean the house, take care of the children, go to work full time, and make sure everything goes tickety-boo.
Yes,
very books much. Out there to help us do all those things. So
very much so. Yeah. Yes. And I was very much on that path. I had the school I went to, we were, very masculine careers. We're put on a pedestal of law, medicine, engineering, finance. So it wasn't about who are you and what are you interested in. It's let's mold you into one of these. Which mold are you fitting most into? And that was very much my experience with my parents as well. My mother, had, I think, severe mental health issues, not that they were ever even acknowledged, let alone diagnosed, and used alcohol and prescription medication to medicate herself.
Right.
And I grew up with this feeling that she had a preconceived idea of what her perfect daughter was like. And thus a lot of the behaviors and rules and responses in the family were about just pushing me into that mold of what her perfect daughter is like, rather than me being me.
Right. And you were the only child. So it wasn't just the perfect daughter, it was the perfect child, really.
Yes, everything. And I was the oldest grandchild, and
wow.
Oh yes, there was and my father was an only child as well, so there was a lot of pressure and responsibility on me to meet all these expectations and be maybe the savior child of my alcoholic mother.
Right. That still happens today. They still expect babies to help mothers stop using drugs. They don't actually say it like that, but when you analyze what they're doing and how they're talking about it, that's it. They're putting their hopes on a 5-pound baby. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So in your home with you talked about your mother and father being functioning alcoholics. Does that mean in your home things were fairly normal, or did things happen when the door closed?
Well, it's hard to define what's normal, but there was definitely a difference between the public persona and what was shown on the outside and at the dinner parties and at the parent-teacher meetings and things like that, versus when the front door closed and my mother would, just take a bottle of gin up to bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. But I didn't know there was really anything any different, because that was my normal. So, maybe everyone else's parents went to bed at 4 o'clock with a bottle of gin. I mean, I had inklings that things were a bit different in other families, but not at the depth that I do now with the understanding I have. So definitely grew up with a, is it me type of feeling hanging over me.
Right.
And, I experienced, a fair amount of emotional and psychological abuse. Like one line, a few lines that were often used on me were, why did you do that? Like, look what's happened now. Your mother's drunk a second bottle of gin today. So there was a lot of attempts at blaming me or making me responsible, or that if I was perfect, that would save my mother from her drinking. And another line as well, which took me a long time to work through, was my mother's name was Helen, and it was, Helen's daughter would not behave like that. And it was like, well, I'm Helen's daughter and I just behaved like that. So,
yeah, that's me.
Yeah, but there was this very, very fixed idea of who I should be, and the gaslighting, the manipulation, some physical abuse. I mean, my youngest memory would have been, I think, probably before I was about 2, based on my understanding of like development and the memories that I've had come up, where big feelings were coming up, which you're meant to be experiencing at that age, because
absolutely,
that's completely
tantrums.
Yes, and that's
why
actually developmentally required.
Right.
It's not even just normal. Like, we need to have those to learn our boundaries, to feel into our nose, feels into our desires, like learn to express ourselves. And I used to be grabbed by my right upper arm by my father when this was starting to brew, and like dragged to the front door. The front door was opened and I was pushed out and locked outside. And even now at 41, I think I'm still, there's like the layers and layers of learned belief and trapped trauma in my body. Like even the other day, I was having some like body work done on my right upper arm, because there's like energetic blockages and physical trauma in my arm from my father's grip on my arm, because good little English girls don't express themselves like that.
Well, and it's also impact on you, just from this layman over here, would be at 2, you can't take care of yourself. Being shoved out the door by your parent figures and left out there would, I would think, immediately cause you to feel that your life was being threatened, even though that doesn't seem reasonable. But at 2, that's perfectly reasonable. What else could you think?
The fear, the terror that I've like uncovered in therapy over this, it felt like I was about to be like left out to die, which if you think from a like more tribal point of view, that if you are, rejected from your tribe, from your caregivers, from your people that keep you safe, you will be eaten by the predators. So my father was dragging.
When you say tribal, what does that mean to you?
I
just want to be clear about what you mean.
Yeah, so going back to before like colonial families and things like that. So when humans, I mean, some still do, but when humans were living in that type of community. Yeah. So for my survival instinct as a mammal, I was about to be thrown out to be
to the wolves.
Potentially be eaten by predators is what my body would have been telling me, that I was about to die.
And I think you're touching on something that's really important. I mean, so often when we think of child abuse, we talk about physical abuse or sexual abuse, but you're talking about profound neglect and emotional trauma with some physical abuse attached to it. and the impact of that. And I just want to remind everyone who's listening that in fact, emotional trauma is sometimes much more profound than the physical trauma. And we've known this forever around battered women, that if you have a bruise on your face, people see it. There's a reaction. The world is aware something happened. If you have any, and so you're sharing it on some level, excuse me, and people have an opportunity to say, hey, what happened? If you have an emotional trauma, the trauma is inside. And while some of us, like me, show everything on their face, apparently, I've been told, um, not everybody does. And that poker face can mean that you really cut off, and that compounds the trauma even more. If you're not able to
Totally.
talk about it, or people aren't seeing it, you
And there's
become even
less,
more invisible.
yeah, and there's less sort of direct cause and effect. Like, I got hit, here's my bruise.
Yes.
It's this sort of nebulous, you know, especially if it's a more like passive aggressive emotional abuse, or
Right.
you know, in my case, it was very much presented as good parenting.
Right. Yes.
So this like
Bear
very
the rod,
weird,
spoil the child.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally, of just like, but they say they're doing this because they love me and that I need to be a good girl. And yeah,
Helen's
just,
daughter, I think you said.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, totally, that Helen's daughter wouldn't do this. It's like, but I am Helen's daughter, but I'm not. Yeah. So
But you're not good enough as Helen's daughter is basically the message that
yes,
you're failing as our child, which is
yeah.
a terrible, terrible message to get as a child.
Mm.
So you left behind England when did you estrange from your family prior to leaving England, or after leaving England?
After leaving England, I mean, I definitely was like pulling away and away as much as I could. Like, I really had it marked at 18. I was leaving for university as a like legitimate way to run away. Like, I was just holding on to run away in the most sort of
socially acceptable way.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So you didn't embarrass your parents further.
Yeah, and also that I would have like the structures and support to do it. You know, if I decided to leave home at 16, that wouldn't have been okay. Whereas to be like, oh, I'm just going to university now, you know, I get my allowance and things like that to be paid for because so I really learned this dance of how to pull away in a way that they don't really even see that I'm pulling away. Or I could give my mother like, what would Helen's perfect daughter do? Okay, she'll do this, so I'll give my mother that so she can, you know, boast at her dinner parties. But meanwhile, this gives me the freedom to not have to be around them. So learning this very sort of sad but very fascinating manipulation.
I suspect it's a dance many, many, many children do, and not all of them estrange and stay estranged, but it may be at 18 something that we need to do just to get onto our own 2 feet and take that next emotional milestone that we must do around that time. So did you come to Canada then, or?
No, I went to university in England.
I see.
And worked in Europe for a little bit, doing ski seasons and just, you know, enjoying exploring. Is, you know, is a great opportunity in your early 20s. And then went to grad school in England when I was 24. And it was from there that I decided that I was going to leave England. I didn't know whether to go to Australia, New Zealand, Canada, but I just knew that I was leaving England.
Right. We need to stop right there, but don't anybody go away, because when we come back, we're going to talk about the process of estranging from family and what that means, and why it's important for some of us to take that very drastic step. Hey, this is Bernadine Fox, your host for ReThreading Madness, the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. If you're enjoying this podcast, don't miss out on the next episode. Make sure you subscribe. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm chatting with Charlotte Watson about what it's like to estrange from your family and why that's necessary sometimes. So one of the things you said before, Charlotte, that I found really interesting is that your shoulder held memories. And I just want to go back to that just a tiny bit to make it clear to people that our memories are stored, our brain and our body are one thing. It's not, the
Mm.
brain is, entirely encapsulated over here, but it controls all your body, and your body's over here and has nothing to do with your brain. We in fact have more nerve endings in our stomach than anywhere else on our body, I've heard. And so we can hold memories, but memories aren't always held in our brains.
Oh
they
no.
no, and so our bodies hold memories. And so when people are having flashbacks, sometimes that flashback is, you know, the sensation of being yanked by their arm, and it's coming out by that physical sensation of being yanked by your arm. And so you talked about memories being held in your shoulder from your dad
For my
grabbing
upper
you,
arm. Yeah.
your
From my
upper
dad
arm. Okay,
grabbing
yes.
me to drag me outside. Yes.
And you did massage therapy to help with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Really just deep massage, just to, yeah, let those memories, those somatic memories like imprinted in my tissues,
Right.
have that opportunity to release.
Right.
So, and I recognize as well, like where that sort of imprint, I mean, I've seen it in my like behavior with men,
Hmm.
particularly like romantic relationships.
Right.
If I, I've had a belief, don't think it'll be surprising to anybody, that if I had too firm a boundaries or shared, big desires, that I
Mm-hmm.
would be rejected.
Oh.
Which was like, so it was fascinating to see that belief system,
Mm-hmm.
to feel my nervous system, like my fight, flight, freeze response,
Mm-hmm.
that if I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to, say to a romantic partner, I'd really like this, or no, I don't want to do that. They were
Right.
like, ooh, coming with everything. Fear, 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 fear. I'm about to be rejected. I'm about to be rejected. Coming out through my nervous system.
Right.
And now it's fascinating to feel like the physical imprint of my arm on that as well.
Wow. So I want to talk about that a little bit more in the next segment, but you estranged completely from your family. So you didn't hang on to cousins, or you had no sisters, but what about
Well,
aunts
yeah,
or?
when I moved here in 2006 to Vancouver after grad school in England, um, I was almost like just tiptoeing away,
Yes.
I told everyone I was coming for 1 year, which I mean, I was, but with the idea of extending it if it worked for me, but I
Right.
didn't admit that to anybody. So when that year was up and my employer offered to sponsor my next work visa, I was like, oh, look, just 1 more year, another work visa. I didn't let on my like true plan. I was
Right.
very much, yeah, sort of on eggshells, tiptoeing, telling people what I thought they wanted to hear, and just pulling away, keeping, like a lot of geographical distance
Yes.
and emotional distance. Like another tactic I learned was that I never told any family what I was going to do. I
Mm-hmm.
only told them what had happened in the past, because then it was like done and dusted.
Right.
They couldn't interfere or control or manipulate, or Helen's
Right.
daughter wouldn't do that. So, and then 3 years after being here, 2009, I got pregnant with my oldest child. And that brought up a lot, I think, for
Yes.
everybody. I announced that I was, going to be staying in Canada and making Canada my home to raise this baby.
Right.
And I was engaged at the time, and we offered to go home to England for, I mean, we legally couldn't get married there, but to have a big ceremony blessing as if it was a wedding.
I'm
Um,
sorry. Why couldn't you get legally married in England?
because we weren't technical residents anymore. So even
Oh,
though we were citizens and still had the red passport, you have to be like technically resident there.
I did
So
not know
anyway,
that.
lots of fun
Okay.
immigration terminology. So
Right.
we had a very casual wedding on the beach, just in shorts and t-shirts in Vancouver with a dozen friends, and then went back to England for the like big full white dress church shebang, which was really to please my mother, because
Yeah, I
I
think you
knew,
called it your mother's daughter's wedding day or something,
yes,
something
it
like that.
was.
Yes.
Yes. That I knew, she always talked about like, oh, when you get married, we'll be doing this and that and that. So I
Ah,
knew it was really important. It's, a big status thing as well in England. So yeah, I wanted to offer her that. But just be mindful as well that I didn't want her having complete free reign apart from anything with the alcoholism. I didn't think she could actually plan a wedding.
Right.
And as it turned out, she couldn't.
Right.
And there I was, pregnant on the other side of the Atlantic, trying to, take what she wanted and try and fit it with what my in-laws, including everybody and logistics and what have you. And yeah, I realized afterwards I never really even considered what I wanted. It was just all about trying to manage the chaos of an alcoholic.
It actually sounds, Charlotte, like you weren't really present in your life until you started making decisions about how to get away. I don't know you fully or your life, but from what you're describing, it sounds like you were constantly managing these two people and
Yes.
on this side over here, trying to figure out how to take another step and take another step and take another step away.
Yeah, very much so. It was just constantly about managing them, really.
Wow.
And I always was aware that there was these like gaslighting and manipulation techniques and things like that. But it became so obvious in the wedding planning. I think one, because there were these like very fixed things that had to be organized.
Right.
And two, most of it was being done over email, whereas before most things were verbal. So someone could always be like, oh no, I didn't say that. Or,
Yes.
oh no, we didn't mean it like that, or whatever.
Yes.
Like, oh, you're mistaken.
Right.
Whereas suddenly it's like, no, look, 2 emails up.
Yeah. Lawyers love email, just so you know.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Because,
they said their lives became easier when email came in because all the conversations are written down for the most part. So,
yeah. So, yeah, it just came so obvious. Like, not that I was consciously trying to deceive myself anymore, but like it was just so blatant how bad things were, and even things that were like sabotaging the wedding. They didn't turn up for the rehearsal dinner, just so many bizarre things that I think I could write a comedy show on how hysterical it was. But took a lot of therapy to see the humor in just how crazy it was. And the final piece came, the grief that was coming up on me as I went through that wedding ceremony that weekend of like, oh my God, like, I can't believe that actually, taking things this extreme.
Right.
The one thing I did care about was the Sunday brunch, that I just wanted this place to just sit and be and not be in ceremony, not with timing, and just have people come and go as they, woke up on the Sunday, and I could actually visit with them. We could actually talk. And that's what, the one piece that I wanted. And right at the end of the ceremony, most people had gone home or gone off to their hotels. And my dear godmother sort of caught me outside the ladies' toilets, as we would say in England. And gave me a kiss and hug, and she was like, darling, just want to say, you look beautiful, look stunning. She was like, can't wait for the brunch tomorrow so we can have a proper catch up and I can hear all about how Canada's going. And then she said, I've noted the change of venue. I was like, I beg your pardon, Auntie Carol? And she was like, your dad phoned last week. The venue's changed. The brunch is now in a marquee in your parents' garden.
Oh dear. And you weren't invited?
No.
Oh,
and
my
they
God.
didn't tell us that they were doing this. And, this is just, this hell is just unfolding in front of my eyes, where I spent the whole weekend just like playing catch up to what weird, manipulative, deceitful, bizarre things that they were doing. And
actually, that reminds me, my mother did something similar. I had picked my wedding songs, and when I walked down the aisle, the song had changed. I just remembered that. I thought, okay, well, I'm walking down the aisle. I can't talk about it now. But come on.
Yeah.
So,
and it was, there'd been so much, gong show after gong show of just changes and this and that. And that was like my final one.
Yes.
It's like, okay, it seems like they're hosting a rival brunch. They haven't told us. They've stolen half the guests.
Yes.
They haven't even like
And not
confessed to the
you.
guests. Yeah, I'm like, how can you host a post-wedding brunch without the freaking bride and groom being?
Yes. No
And
kidding.
I remember my now ex-husband, he was like, yeah, like you always described how you felt like they just needed like a cardboard cutout of you. Like they didn't
Yeah,
actually
I think
need
that's
you.
true.
He
Were
was
you
like, I
pregnant
always,
at the time
I
that you got
was.
how pregnant were you?
Shockingly, I was 4 months pregnant. Shh. Very shocking in English culture.
I
Actually,
know, I know. I
a
know that
distant,
shocking English attitude very well.
yeah.
So do you think that that played a part in it? That
Well, we weren't allowed to talk about the fact I was pregnant at the wedding.
right.
Although, interestingly, a very distant cousin came up to me and just whispered at me at some point. She was like, your grandmother was pregnant when she got married. And she was the most judgy of them all.
Oh, really? I
So
love
yeah,
that.
that was like, again, the sort of comic relief of like, oh. So, but yeah, it was at that moment outside the ladies' toilets when I'm like, I think they've just sabotaged, whatever, they've just, yeah, stolen my brunch. And I was just like, they can't meet this baby.
No,
Like,
so even though that was the point that you realized this isn't working with your family, and maybe
yeah,
I'm getting it that that's where the crux of it, where you
that was
decided
the,
that's
yeah, the
done.
final nail.
Yes, the final nail, and that's the important part, is that it's the final nail. It's all the stuff that came before, all the years that came before, and all the emails and all the realizations that we go through. I also estranged from my family, and I think like you, estranged from everyone. I didn't keep cousins or aunts or uncles
Yeah.
or family friends or anything. I simply walked away with my 2 kids. So that was my family now. And I haven't actually heard very many people who, like us, have done that, but it was an important thing. So I want to ask you, for you, why was it important to estrange from all of them?
There was just so much, probably still is, like triangulation and side taking. And like a couple of years previously, one of my uncles was getting divorced, and that was bringing up a lot of reactions in the family as well. And we'd actually got quite close talking about, our experiences. And then suddenly he seemed to just turn and went and
Oh,
told my mother and grandmother like what I'd shared about
oh
my
no.
experience. And I remember a distant cousin saying to me, she was like, oh yeah, he sold you out to get back in the nest.
I'm sorry,
um
say that again. Your dad sold you out?
no, my uncle,
Oh, your
my uncle
uncle.
sold me
Oh,
out to
of
be allowed back
course.
in the nest.
So he
The
betrayed you, and that gave him a door back in.
Yeah,
That's so
totally.
sad, really, when you think about it. I mean, that's not your Christmas, holiday family, or you know what I mean?
Oh
It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
you're being sold out by somebody who basically wanted to get, something for it. And it's so
yeah, all
shocking
the
because it's so fake,
transactional and yeah, oh yeah,
you know?
totally. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's transactional, it's
Yeah.
status, it's just so colonial, like
Yes.
capitalist.
Yes. Absolutely.
um so
So how
yeah, so that,
scary was it? You coming back to Canada, you're not going to talk to anybody in your family. Did you find yourself missing a conversation with your aunt or uncle or a cousin, or how scary was it to come back to a society that for the most part is, structured on the notion of family?
hmm, it wasn't too bad. I mean, I had so much distance from them. I wasn't relying on them for anything day to day, or I was building my own rhythms and community and rituals and holidays in Canada. So that
Right.
really helped that I'd already like put some structure in place in my life. The geographical distance helped as well. Um, the biggest piece was the grief, the
Hmm.
the the realization that my mother would never be anything
Yeah.
anywhere near
And
how
that's
I
so hard, isn't
needed
it?
her to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that hope. It's that mothers will somehow magically become what we need them to be, even in the
Yeah,
face of everything, lifetimes that have told us it's not going to happen. We need to
yeah.
just take a little break. It's a hard place to take a break, but
Okay.
we're going to come back and talk about that grief and talk about what you've done. I know you've done some interesting things in your healing journey, and I want to talk about them. So don't go away, everybody. We'll be right back with Charlotte. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm talking with Charlotte Watson about family, estrangement from family, and how we cope with it. Those of us who've had to estrange. Um, I want to just go back, Charlotte, to the brunch. There's a significance there, clearly, because that was the point at which you left. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes. Well, the end of the wedding, after I'd found out this was happening, I kissed everyone goodbye just in a normal way because I didn't want to alert the enemy that the final nail had been banged in. I think it was particularly significant that I was pregnant. That I didn't know what my transition into motherhood was going to be like. I had no
Right.
idea what to expect from motherhood, like parenthood. It's,
No, we
I think even
don't.
the most, researched and informed person is not going to know what their unique individual experience is going to be. So just knowing that I had this like big transition with all this uncertainty coming up was that it would just be too unsafe to have people around who manipulate and cross boundaries and lie. And yeah, so I knew I just needed that space, that I didn't
Mhm.
need to manage the family, and especially with how much they were encroaching on me, like how they
Yes.
demonstrated in the wedding. It's like, well, I'm the firstborn, I had all of that, like this grandchild is probably going to have even more. um and I knew I didn't have the strength, the knowledge, the resources as a new mom entering this new arena to manage them as well.
Right.
So they don't, and I realized they weren't bringing anything to my life other than additional stress. There wasn't
Right.
anything that they were providing. So it really was a bit of a no-brainer from a logistical, practical point of view to say goodbye. And I just had to work through that grief of grieving the fact that I would never have parents who were anywhere near like the support that I needed, and to grieve
Mhm.
people who are still alive as well. That
Yes.
was an interesting piece. Or,
Yes. Yes.
grieving roles as opposed to just people. And
It is hard, and I know I mentioned this before, but it's really hard to look at the hope that you've been carrying around, that, say, your mother is going to somehow magically figure out that she's done something to hurt you, or has betrayed you, or has put you in harm's way, or and that
I actually just wanted her to respect the boundary.
yeah, yeah, there you go. And then there's
She just
that. Just respect the boundary. I
turn
get
up to
it.
the brunch,
But
lady.
it's
Turn up to the brunch. She
and
doesn't
don't
bet your
don't take my
grandchildren.
guests away. I get
Yeah.
that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that we don't people who estrange from families don't do that in this society where it's so structured on family, without a lot of thought and a lot of thinking. You had years and years and years and years of thinking, and taking one more step and taking one more step,
Yeah,
and
and trying to manage it in a way that worked for both of us. And
yeah,
yeah, like how much
yeah,
energy I put into trying to keep that dance alive in a
yes,
way that like was not betraying me as much as it had been.
right.
So yeah.
And I don't want to in some way say that all us parents are um don't make mistakes. We all make mistakes.
Mm.
I make mistakes, my
Oh
God. I
yes.
mean, these days I'm learning more and more and more about the mistakes I've made, and struggling to, as a parent, to do it all better. Not always successful, but trying. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that it, I don't know if it happened to you. I know when I estranged from my family, it was back in '89. So it's been a long, long time. But me and other people I knew at the time, went through a lot of stuff of, oh, you're just making this up. You're being crazy. How bad could it be? This is your mother. This is your father. This is your family. Go to Christmas dinner. You don't want to hurt them. All that stuff. We were minimized what we went through and
Yeah.
how big it must have been to actually leave. So instead of recognizing how big it was, this society built on family simply tried to maintain the family by telling us to essentially shut up and go home.
Yeah, be a good daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Just be a good daughter. So yeah, but I'd reached that like such solid internal validation and knowing that
Right.
I was just like firm in my conviction, firm in my belief,
Right.
that it didn't matter what anybody said or did. Oh, actually, that's not quite true. Like they wouldn't have swayed me, but it would have felt very hurtful and twisting the knife in and adding wounds.
Yes.
If people have been like, it was just a brunch, like she
Yes.
didn't know. Oh, just
Yes.
And I mean, my grandmother wrote to me and she was like, what's happened, Charlotte? Your mother's so upset.
I'm sorry, did you just say your grandmother raped you?
Wrote me a
you.
letter.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
And so she said what? Because I didn't hear anything after the word rape. So
fair enough. Yes, my grandmother wrote me a letter and said, what happened after the wedding? Your mother's just, we have no idea what happened. Your mother's just really upset. And I mean, that was another like aha moment for me of like, oh, that was another manipulation line they used for me. They're like, your mother's very upset. There was never a need to like quantify why or
ask you, how are you?
Yeah, how are you? It's just like, your mother's upset and it's your responsibility to fix that. And it was like, no, she can be upset about whatever she wants. Like, I'm not responsible for her feelings. So I was like, oh, isn't that fascinating? Like, no acknowledgement of anything to do with the wedding of like, oh, we didn't see you at the brunch. You didn't turn up to your brunch, Charlotte. Anything like that. There was just, your mother's upset. And it was just like, wow, not my problem.
No. And it's funny. I don't think people really realize what they're doing sometimes because they're so entrenched in some social thing that they believe is normal. When I split up from my battering husband before I actually estranged from my family, I had a family friend come up to me and say, oh, I hear you left your husband. Stop being so stupid. Go home and pack your bags and go back to him. That was it. They didn't ask me one question after why I did it. Whatever the reason was, it was frivolous and silly, and I should just stop being stupid.
I had a similar one when I started sharing that I thought I might need to leave my husband. I had someone like, but why? You look so amazing together in the Facebook photos.
Okay, so we're going to have some learning in society about Facebook is not always reality. Oh my God. I can't believe we have to go there. So you've done a lot of therapy. And one of the things that I've seen and I feel very drawn to is that you did this thing where you kept submerging yourself in very cold water. And it had to do with the vagus nerve. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Our autonomic nervous system.
Yes.
So, yes.
Not that you haven't done other things, but I'm just being selfish here.
Yeah, that's my latest, I call it my medicine. It's amazing. The children find it hysterical because for years before I was always like, oh, I don't want to get in the water. Okay, I'll get in to be a good mom. Like, I'll come swimming. Whereas suddenly I'm like, we're spending a COVID winter at the river every day, children, so mommy can plunge herself into freezing water. So it was this very intrinsic like calling in my body to do that. And I just found it so many benefits, like reset my nervous system. So I think most of us every day are living in some minor inkling of fight, flight, or freeze. Our nervous system's just activated. And it just shuts that down and takes you almost into like a survival mode to give you this reset. And since then, this is where I've found a lot of, I talked about that, like the trauma held in my tissues, like that has been coming up to be released so much. And then from a sort of mental point of view, I I've had to like shift my mental thought processes to be in cold water like that.
Yes, I understand that.
And just this sort of mantra and this understanding of like, I am not the cold water. The cold water is just around me.
Right.
And that's just been like amazing for, you know, aspects of COVID and other you know, crazy and chaotic things are happening in the world. Like there's a lot of chaos around me right now, but I don't need to join in that chaos. I can be at one with myself while I'm aware that the chaos is around me.
Right. And so you've done massage therapy, you've done this vagal, what do you call that? Resetting your nervous system with cold water,
Yeah,
or
I just call it
therapy?
cold water plunging. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's the
All
Wim
right.
Hof technique as well with breathing. Yeah.
Which was that?
Wim Hof.
Wim Hof.
So there's a breathing technique you can do before to use your breath to help like set yourself up for the optimal release in the water.
Really? Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So what has therapy been like for you? Like have you found things in therapy where, like everybody says, oh, you're just looking at the negative, you know, you should be focusing on the positive. Surely I've gotten all these things. So,
oh yeah.
So have in therapy, have you been able to refocus? Have you seen your parents in a different light? What's been the most important thing that you found in therapy?
Oh my gosh. Probably my own self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was interesting, that piece about estranging from them.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for my child more than I did it for myself.
Right. And you went home recently as well.
Yeah, after 10 years. Yeah.
After 10 years. And so everybody said, don't see your father, he's mad. But you did go and see him.
Yes. So sort of 10 years after becoming a mother, estranging everybody, lots of people started dying in England.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, like, am I being called back? Including my mother, who was found dead with a straw in a bottle of gin. Like she'd literally drunk herself to death.
So being somebody who doesn't drink a whole lot, what does that mean, the straw in the bottle? Like
she was drinking gin through a straw.
Oh, right out of the bottle.
Yeah.
I see.
And was found dead next to the bottle. Like, I mean, I always sort of knew that she would die of the alcoholism in some way, but I expected it to be like the liver disease or a car crash or falling downstairs drunk.
So she died of alcohol poisoning.
Yes. Like that. Yeah, it was like, that was tragically validating in a very...
Yeah, that's pretty hard to do on your own, I think, isn't it? Like, don't you pass out anyway? But you went home and you...
Yes. So there'd been, all these deaths, like my dear godmother and then my mother. And each time I was like, oh, and like people like, are you coming back for the funeral? And all these people started like crawling out the woodwork who I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. And they're like contacting me through my business website and things like that. And I'm like, I thought you'd all just, we haven't been in contact in years. How do you know how to get hold of me? So there was this like calling for me to go back. And each time I'm like, I'm not ready. Right. And then I was, in a very deep meditation process at one point, and I got a very clear message there. They're like, you will never feel ready to go back.
Right.
So next time there is a calling, you just need to go back.
Right.
And I was like, okay. And then about a week later, my uncle died. And I was like, okay. And I just booked my flight and headed back. And very interestingly, it was my 39th birthday. And I've been told that my father like fully blamed me for my mother's death, and there was a lot of rage and blame at me, and people were like, I don't think you should see him. I don't think it would be physically safe. Like, he is so vengeful on you that you killed your mother. But I was like, no, I just have to do this.
Right.
So the day of my 39th birthday, I'd been at my uncle's funeral the day before, and I just walked up the street of where I grew up on all those years ago. It was so surreal.
Mm-hmm.
And I got outside the house, and I'd been warned that there was probably a lot of rage and blame, but then also I was aware there could be the other side of a lonely old man, like, who like would be pleading me to be back in our lives or something, a very big emotional reaction. And I was actually more scared of like the pleady, lonely old man. but I was just like, okay, I just find out. And I walked up the drive and I kept on thinking like, I should be scared. I should be scared. I'm not. It was like I transcended fear or something.
Right. That's great.
Knocked on the front door, and the door opened, and the door that I had been dragged outside of as a child as well in all those toddler years. And we just took a deep breath, and it's like, I can cope. I am ready for whatever is going to be presented to me. And neither was there the raging man, neither was there this like pitiful, pleading, lonely old man. Instead, there was a very sweet old man with dementia who just said, hello, are you passing? Would you like to come in for a cup of tea?
Wow. So he didn't recognize you?
No, not at all.
Wow.
So when I went, we made a cup of tea, chatted about the weather and about the garden, as you do. He asked if we could do the Telegraph crossword together, and then if we could watch an episode of Inspector Lewis. And it was just a lovely little visit with a sweet old man who doesn't remember his traumas, who doesn't remember his demons, who doesn't remember his
Helen's daughter. He does not remember Helen's daughter. No. So do you think that was a gift or
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. It was like, the narrative in society is, dementia, Alzheimer's is so sad, so bad. In this case, absolutely the happiest I've ever seen him, living in the present, just happily, cups of tea and Telegraph crosswords. Like,
wow.
So yeah, this pleasant little polite English visit. And at one point I did get a little choked up that he said, do you have children? And I was like, oh, like I have your only grandchildren who are just amazing, and like you will never meet them. But I just said, yes. He said, that's nice. And we carried on. So yeah, as our visit wrapped up, one of his carers.
Some happy, some sadness.
Oh, yes.
Sounds like life.
Yes, very much so. And as I wrapped up my visit, one of his carers arrived, and she was a little surprised to see someone in the house, which probably should have been. And I do look just like my father as well, so I imagine that was a little surreal for her.
Right.
And she was like, oh, who's this? And my father was like, he introduced me by his two nieces' names. He was like, oh, it's Camilla. Oh, Caroline, Camilla, Caroline, or something.
Right.
And so, yeah, he obviously thought I was one of his nieces, and I didn't say anything to that. I just thanked the carer for everything she does and taking good care of him. I kissed him goodbye, and he just said, stop by again next time you're passing. I was like, I will.
So as you relate that story right now, how do you feel?
I have some tears coming up. Actually, I really feel them in my throat.
Yeah.
But as I stepped over that, doorway that I'd been dragged outside of as a child and left, it's like I'd stepped into womanhood. I'd really stepped into myself, that I had, they say to step into adulthood, particularly like parenthood, you renegotiate the relationship with your parents, because everybody's sort of promoting in a way, your parents are becoming grandparents, you're going from child to, and that it had not been safe to do that. I had not been resourced enough to do that in relation with my parents, with all their trauma and behaviors and what have you. So I'd had to have that space, and then feeling that growth in me, that I could go back and face that rage, that blame, and be compassionate to him, but hold my truth. It was like, oh, I'm a full woman now.
No, you literally reframe things with new information and healing. Way to go. I'm sorry to say that we have to stop. And it's been an incredible conversation, Charlotte. Thank you so much for having it with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
And that's our show. I'm Bernadine Fox, who just had the pleasure of speaking with Charlotte Watson. But most importantly, as always, our thanks goes out to you for joining us today. Stay safe out there. I'm Bernadine Fox, and you've just listened to ReThreading Madness, the podcast that dares to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program, or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. If you enjoyed this show, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.
I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. Why don't I wonder how you know? Well, surely you don't have all of the facts. You could be just making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of magic in the words that you breathe, saying, baby, take it from me. It's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Everything's gonna be alright. With anyone else, it's such a cliche, just words people say to be nice. Or someone